and I'm involved with several projects that are either conceived or supported by Aubrey Gray. So today I'm going to talk about a system, an information technology system that we are currently developing for the funding organizations to be able to track and analyze funding that is going into aging research. So before I start, I just want to ensure that if you go here, you will not see anything. The system is going to go online in about 2 weeks. The reason why we're presenting it here is because we want to form a more complete scientific advisory board, and we want to have several category editors helping us with the project. The system is already developed. We need to populate it a little bit. So, the ultimate question that policymakers and aging advocates, aging research advocates usually ask is that you don't have much money going into aging research, and if you ask anybody how much money is being spent on aging, everybody will have a different estimate. So just ask yourself how much money is going into aging research annually worldwide. And the largest and the meanest body of funding in the world is the NIH, that spends almost $30 billion annually. They do their own categorization for their spending, their own categorical spending. We took their databases and looked at the categories. So they believe that they spend about $2.5 billion, $2.4 billion on aging annually. That's their fiscal budget. Cancer, which is also related to aging in a way, it's $5.6 billion. Cardiovascular, $2.3, diabetes, $1 billion. They invest $600 million into regenerative medicine and $600 million into stem cell research. So if you do analyze their database more closely, if you have a much more granular view of that, the actual life extension potential projects are very rare. So that's actually what Aubrey is working on. He identified his own projects, his own sets of projects that are targeting damage and that are intended to prolong life. Most of the projects in the NIH universe do not fall in that category. So what we want to create is we want to create a centralized decision support system for aging funding organizations such as the NIH, the European Commission, Wellcome Trust, large pharmaceutical organizations, to be able to pull in their project data, and we follow the money. So we look at how much they spend on individual projects, and then allow them to group those projects in a very flexible manner and visualize the trends, the spending patterns, and be able to project and strategize to be able to see the future. So what we did, we created the joint initiative of the funding organizations. NIH is currently not participating, but we are working on that to be able to pull in the project databases. The goal is to create a very flexible system that any funding body, researcher, patient advocacy group, or a policymaker would be able to go in and take a look at the spending patterns, where the money is flowing. And there were precedents in the industry already that were targeting the same goals. One is the AgingPortfolioorg. It is a system which has been deployed in 2000, again using fairly old methods for visualizations of the project, but it has a very impressive list of supporting organizations. So one is the NCI, it's a multi-billion-dollar funding body, American Cancer Society, etc., etc. So they did approximately the same for cancer. if you look at what they're doing, they're taking, again, groups of databases from all over the place, categorizing them into various classes and onto their database to be able to categorize them in a more flexible way. And we built an interface and a system for scientific advisory board members, potential scientific advisory board members, to go in and classify the projects by their own aging theories or hypothesis. So basically, you would be able to classify the projects much better. How it works: we take the NIH database, we put it in a dynamic section of our own system, so we get regular updates. It doesn't really influence the semantics that are already accumulated in the database. We look at their own keywords, their own categories, abstracts, etc., and apply scripts and manual editor time input to categorize their projects further. So, for example, the beta-catenin in T-cell aging would fall under aging, cancer, immune system, and many other categories, and apart from that, it will also fall under SENS and SENS immunorejuvenation. Aubrey may disagree with that, but that will be his call. He would be managing SENS, right? So the project takes data and processes it on two levels. So one is the automatic integration of the database that we download by keywords. It's a script, it's a robot which goes in, looks at the keywords, and maps it into our database into specific categories. And then we have a manual system which allows editors to go in and classify projects further. So the automated process flow looks as follows. We take the NIH database, put it on our own server, completely uncategorized. We apply our own scripts onto the database and put it in the stack 2, which is a database of projects that may be related to aging but are still uncategorized. Then we have human editors that will go in and categorize those projects further and apply their own semantics onto the projects. There could be many editors with their own visions of aging, and they could create their own categories as they wish. Then we could look at the overall map of those categories and visualize them for those editors, for policymakers, for funding organizations, etc. And then the database is uploaded into our central aging portfolio database. So, for example, if we download the NIH database, when we download the NIH database, we get a project which is called Impact of Aging on Stem Cell Repair in Atherosclerosis. We apply automatic semantics onto the project. We map it into regeneration, we map it into disease, aging, cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis. We can also put it in repair category, and it is an applied project, so we also put it in the clinical applications. And then editors can go in and classify it further. So if there is a case when we do not get a project in a specific database, so for example, the project does not fall under into the NIH universe and is funded by somebody which is not affiliated with the Aging Portfolio, we could authorize a user to go in, add project, and it will go into the Aging and Categorize stack. And then we will use human editors to apply additional semantics onto that project. And that will happen here. It will be done by the SAB and the specialized editor teams. So there are several levels of users. One user level is funding organizations. So for example, if you are not NIH, European Commission, and you are just a large pharmaceutical company and you still want to collaborate with us, you can have a very flexible interface for adding projects into the system. So funding organizations would be able to add their projects into the system in a very flexible manner. Then we have the SAB. And the SAB will set the strategic direction of the aging portfolio and appoint and approve category editors. And it's almost like in Wikipedia or the Netscape Open Directory project, where we would be able to have a very large human editor base. And category editors, they own specific categories for projects, and they have their own hierarchy, similar to Demos or Wikipedia, where you have more senior editors looking at lower level editors' work. And of course the development team, that is us, and collaborating with a large number of programmers who are working on the project, so we would be able to administer the site. Currently, again, the system is not online, but I'll show you a few screenshots of what is available. We modeled the system originally to be very similar to the NIH internal knowledge management system for reviewing grants, for reviewing their spending. Actually, it is also publicly available partially at the reports.nih.gov. You can go there and go into categorical spending. You will see a very similar interface. But what we did, we added more flexible research areas, so editors would be able to go in, create those research areas, group projects, and visualize those projects in the very flexible manner. You would be able to search by funding amount, so if you are interested in what kind of grants are available for specific projects or for specific areas, you would be able to come in, put your funding limits, look at what's out there and what has been already awarded. And you can look at the funding, the receiving and funding organizations by type. You also would be able to group those. So the main search page looks as follows. And again, if you would like, come to me after the presentation. I'll show you how it works online if you're interested in becoming an editor or collaborating on this project. This is the main search page. This is the actual system which is running on a server. It has the keyword area where you would be able to run through a very large number of databases and large number of projects using your keywords. You can look at fiscal year spending. You can look at various categories. We actually categorize some of the SENS and SENS in essence projects. We did those categories automatically and realized that actually the amount of money being spent on SENS projects is very low. We thought it would be more. You will be able to look at the funding organization, who spends how much on what, and the receiving organization and the funding mechanism. So that's what is possible today. In the future, we're going to have a much more flexible system. So this is an example, a sample of the output results. So we will be able to see the individual projects that fall under specific categories, or for example, results for a keyword cell. You'll be able to look at the project title, investigator, receiving organization, funding organization, fiscal year, and the amount of money received. Then you will be able to drill down and get a much more detailed view of the project, including the results, and that is publications, links to other projects, and our SAB members would be able to go into the individual project and also have an impact on longevity, for example, section added. So we'll be able to categorize the projects much deeper. And you can look at the history of the project, who funded that, how much was spent, what were the results, and project relations. How does this project relate to other projects? We developed a fairly advanced relational database. This is just the top view. And what is interesting is actually it's faster than the NIH internal database. I had a programmer team and team of programmers in Russia working full-time over a month to optimize it for fast searching. Those are the main areas in the database. So we focus mainly on the area of research, so the majority of the database actually goes into classification, and that is the static portion of the database. It does not get updated automatically when the NIH databases or other funding organizations' databases update. This is the semantics that our own editors and SAB members create. And of course, we look at individual projects. We have a lot of data that is carried by that particular object. We have a very good overview of the funding bodies, and we can create research groups. So system benefits, where is it going to go from here? In the next 3 to 4 months, this is what we would be able to provide. We would be able to provide visual interfaces and visual use of the database. So you would be able to go in and, for example, analyze trends in the industry. Who is spending how much over time, where geographically, by funding organization, by the NIH Institute, and also do it by various categories. So if you want to look at, for example, mitochondrial DNA mutations, you would be able to see how the world, funding world, looks like for that particular research area. We would be able to look at the trends for specific research areas. For example, for cancer, we would be able to look at how much money is being spent, and then we would be able to drill down into individual years and individual funding bodies. We would be able to, currently we're working with several large pharmaceuticals that agreed to share some of their project data, except they don't want to disclose funding amounts, exact funding amounts, but we would be able to use approximate figures to be able to see how much each of these is spending on aging. Just looking at those figures, at the R&D dollars, most of those are being spent in clinical trials, but out of here, I'm sure some of that is being spent on aging, and we would be able to classify that in a database. That's the same for Europe. You would be able to see how the research areas intersect and what projects do fall under these intersections. We would be able to analyze the funding flows. In the US, it's actually going to be very complex because NIH gives money to corporations, to academic institutions, etc., and researchers, and they themselves have endowments, they have money, and we need to visualize those relationships. As a matter of fact, Japan does that, so we took that best practice and put it in our requirements documents for the system. We would be able to see, to compare individual organizations on their spending on various initiatives. We would be able to see how much money is being spent on a specific disease, and then again, we would be able to go and drill down. We would be able to analyze the NIH database much more effectively and apply additional semantics to their database. Again, we would be able to provide research funding bodies with mechanisms to analyze their own internal funding flows and the distribution. Most of them, they do not have that. As a matter of fact, when we looked at what NIH has today, we do not think it's very efficient. We would be able to visualize aging projects on the map, and that that concept we took from clinicaltrials.gov. It's actually a very nice knowledge management system for managing clinical trials, and we are going to download clinical trials databases into our systems as well to be able to link aging funding with clinical trials. We'll be able to drill down into the state, see how much money is being spent by the state, and how many projects, etc., etc. So that will be very good for policymakers that are trying to convince governments to spend more on specific areas. We would be able to see how government compares to academia and corporate sector. We would be able to visualize the database by the Ferber chart, developed by John Ferber, present here. We would be able to drill down on specific organelles. We'll be able to look at the extracellular matrix, go in, take a look at the number of projects, and how much money is going into that specific area. We'll be able to have networks of projects, would be able to have, again, clinical overview of the projects, look at how commercial entities are doing in aging, would be able to look at specific diseases and how much money is being spent by commercial entities, and we would be able to provide some data for the venture capital sector as well. So right now we are looking for the SAB members. So the purpose of this presentation is to convince some of you that we need to collaborate, and that is going to be a centralized system that hopefully will help convince some of the funding bodies to adjust their spending patterns. Again, the entity is independent, is going to be impartial. We're not going to tell them what to do, it's just we want to provide them with tools to make their funding decisions better. We are looking for project databases. If you do work for the NIA, or if you do work for some European Commission associated funding body, or a large charity, please talk to me. We may want to collaborate on integrating your database into the system. We want to network with biopharmaceutical companies that do have aging projects funded. We do not necessarily require exact amount of funding going into the projects. We would be able to use approximate figures, but we do need that for a good industry overview. And of course, if you are in bioinformatics, we're very interested in collaborating with you to see if you can help us program the system further. Also, we already had, we performed a very large industry survey asking government, academia, non-profit organizations, and for-profit organizations for feedback on the project and on basic design fundamentals. So based on the feedback, we designed the project so far. But the survey is ongoing, so if you have comments on what database we can integrate in AgingPortfolio, who could be the appropriate person to contact for that particular database, and how would you classify the projects, we would really need your feedback. So thank you, and please do contact me at any time at 24/7 at my US phone number or my email. I would like to thank my collaborators on this project. There are too many of them. The main collaborator is Olga Kobarova, who did most of the database coding. Thank you very much, and let me open the floor for questions.